So after a long delay, South Korea and the United States have finally released a joint fact sheet covering key details of economic and security issues. For more on this, we're joined today by Christophe Gaudin, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. Professor Gaudin, thanks for coming in today.
Good morning.
So we finally have the details of the joint fact sheet, right? What's your overall assessment of the paper?
There was a lot left to be discussed because the way things happen with President Trump is that basically he likes to announce big, shiny numbers on TV, and then generally details are left to be discussed later. So what we can see for now is that many of these technicalities have been addressed. And namely, as we saw in your previous report, Korean corporations are to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in America. So for now, what we can say is that Korean investments in America are to increase sharply. And at the same time, what we can also see is that Korean tariffs to America have also been significantly decreased. From 25 to 15%. So it seems that for the moment, both parties, America and Korea alike, have come to some sort of agreement.
Right. And on security issues, the fact sheet now formalizes Washington's approval for South Korea's plan to build nuclear-powered submarines, but some say there are still issues left to be discussed because it's unclear where the submarine will actually be built. What's your take on this?
It is most unclear because on the one hand, a few days ago, President Trump declared that it should be built in America, and National Security Advisor Ri Song-lak said the exact opposite, that major components will be first built in Korea and then assembled we don't know where. What is interesting here is that this nuclear-powered submarine issue is typical of the difficulties Korea and America are facing here, because Korea has been putting a lot of money on the table. But in fact, the bottom line here is not only the money. The bottom line is where this money is actually to be invested. Because if, of course, these components are to be built in Korea, this will mean jobs for Korea. And the same, of course, if they go to America. And the issue is that in America, the industrial infrastructure is so deeply damaged that I do not see how realistically all of this could be happening in America in a near future. So long story short here, the problem is that Trump needs these billions to be invested in America, but also in American factories. And America, for the moment, is not in capacity to actually deliver. So for the moment, I think things are on a standstill, unfortunately, and contradictory statements are still to be released in the next days, I'm afraid.
I see. And what about the issue of changes of the role of, or the cost regarding the U.S. forces Korea? The presidential office rejected media reports, saying Korea's share of defense costs is set to increase. What's your take on this?
Well, the thing is that Korea has already been agreed to send a lot of money to America, because for the moment, what's been agreed on is a trade-off. Basically, Korea agreed to invest hundreds of billions, literally, in America in exchange for lifting, so these tariffs from 25 to 15%. So the Lee administration, from their point of view, thinks that so far so good, Korea has been delivering everything that could be reasonably expected. But that's not the way the Trump administration sees it, because right now, from Trump's point of view, diplomacy is all about business. And he's determined to get all of his so-called allies, Japan, Korea, the EU alike, he's determined to get them to pay as much as possible for their own defense. So the problem now is that here, I think that the more you give Trump, the more he will require from you. And this escalation, I do not see how we could stop it realistically. So for the moment, unfortunately, talks are to continue. And with Trump, there is no agreement you can call definitive. That's the issue here.
I see. And while that's happening, President Lee Jae-myung is now set for his first visit to the Middle East. What do you think President Lee is trying to achieve by visiting the UAE, Egypt, and Turkey?
In fact, what President Lee is trying to achieve here is alternate routes to diplomacy. Realistically, Korea had only one major ally, the US. And this ally, to put it mildly, is not as reliable as they used to be a few years and even a few months ago. So what Korea is trying to do now under President Lee's administration is trying to find new allies, not for multilateral, as in the past, but bilateral agreements, state by state. For instance, in the case of the UAE, it is the only major partner that Korea has in the Middle East, and so Korea is trying to strengthen ties with the UAE to push for Korean exports in the region as a middle power without being able to count on the US support as much as it used to in a very close past.
Right, and he's also, set to go to the G20 summit in South Africa. And this takes place as leaders of the world's two largest economies, Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, both decided not to attend this year's summit. What can we expect to happen there?
Pretty much the same as in the APEC summit in Gyeongju a couple of weeks ago. In fact, the time for world global agreements is over, and it is not to come back in any foreseeable future. What we have now is a time for face-to-face talks and bilateral agreements. So what Korea can expect to achieve is not a global agreement between, say, East Asia and African countries to lift tariffs. What Korea can expect here is to improve relations, in this case with South Africa, in order to boost exchanges between both countries. In fact, here, what Korea can expect is not a major achievement, but a sort of step-by-step improvement of relations between African countries and East Asian countries in order to somehow navigate these uncharted waters we're forced to navigate into because of Trump's re-election. So long story short, nothing major, but what is very interesting with Lee Jae-myung's diplomacy is that it is pretty much a diplomacy of step-by-step achievements. And so far, so good. Korea has been able, for the moment, to compensate the loss it had to suffer because of Trump's tariffs. So let's hope it will keep going down this road in the next future.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how it goes. All right, Professor Gaudin, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.